Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Turkey Talks. Today, we will be discussing Turkish-Russian relations in the wake of President Erdoğan's visit to Sochi in Russia. He met with President Putin of Russia, and they went over quite a few issues, including economic relations, trade relations, tourism, but also geopolitical conflict areas, including Syria, Libya, Karabakh, Azerbaijan, and Afghanistan. And this was their first meeting since the start of the pandemic in person. They've had many talks over the phone, video conferences, but today was an in-person meeting. And this came right after President Erdoğan's visit to New York for the UN General Assembly meetings. And the news out of his visit to the US was quite a bit about the S-400s. Professor Küçükcan and myself last week, we discussed the significance of this visit to the United Nations, Turkey's continued emphasis on multilateralism, Turkey's relationship with the United States. And right after that visit, as I said, today there was a visit to Russia. So today we want to discuss Turkish-Russian relationship, various aspects of it, but we actually will start with a topic that is not very much talked about in the Turkish-Russian relationship, Crimea, and potentially Ukraine as well, because we have with us one of the most important experts on Crimea in Turkey. Filiz Tutku Aydın is an assistant professor at Social Sciences University of Ankara. She has a brand new book out, a research book, I should say. It's a very, well-researched, thick book, to warn you, on Crimean Tatars. It's titled Emigre, Exile, Diaspora and Transnational Movements of the Crimean Tatars, Preserving the Eternal Flame of Crimea. Welcome, Tutku. I'll call her by her first name because we're friends. But we want to congratulate her on her book, and we will turn to her for her comments about Crimea, what Turkey's policy about Crimea is, how Russia sees that, and whether this Crimea issue plays a significant amount of significant role in the bilateral relations between Turkey and Russia. And then I'll turn to Professor Küçükcan, and we will discuss altogether the overall relationship and where it's headed, and of course the regional dynamics as well. Tutku, floor is yours. We are curious about your perspective on the Crimea issue in Turkish-Russian relations. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me for this very needed program in a timely manner. I also want to thank you for your nice words about my book. I am of course mainly specialized in ethnic politics and nationalism and diaspora studies, but my interest with Crimean Tatars brings me to foreign policy issues always. This is not what I prefer, but because of the occupation and annexation of Crimea, there I am. I have to, of course, research this dimension of the Crimean Tatar issue. The Crimean issue is always on the table, I would say. And today I read many comments about why does our president bring about the issue of Crimea just before he goes to Sochi, right? Everybody, I mean, not everybody, but some people were arguing this is perhaps not very logical, right? Because we know that Russia is quite harsh about even bringing this topic to the table. But I would not agree with these critics because Crimea is always on the table when we come to the Turkish-Russian relations. And this is one of the, I think, red lines of Turkish politics. Turkish politics, despite change of foreign ministers, has been always consistent about Turkey's stance on Crimea. And as you know, one of the first world leaders were Turkish leaders who visited, Ukraine to affirm that their support for Ukrainian territorial integrity. And this position has not changed but strengthened. Ukraine is a new state, so it doesn't have enough experience to defend its position in international organizations. So who do you think is supporting, mouthpiecing, right? The Crimean Tatar issue. Who is bringing the Crimean Tatar issue to the international organizations? It's Turkish diplomats, right? This is, one of the perhaps few issues in Turkish politics that Turkish state has followed a very continuous and consistent position. And it's also not due to just this government, right? Turkish, Crimean Tatar diaspora in Turkey for a long time has worked for this, right? In a way, we always kind of, I will speak as the kind of representative of the Crimean Tatar diaspora as well here. We always underline that Crimea is like Cyprus, right? What is the importance of Cyprus for Turkey? It's great. And same is for Crimea. I mean, you can say this if you just look at the map. It has a huge strategic importance for Russia, but it has maybe even more strategic importance for Turkey, right? The security of Turkish straits, the security of our, northern shores are threatened if Crimea becomes a security threat for us. So I don't understand many critics who say, why is Crimea on the table, right? And moreover, Crimea and Turkish support to Ukraine, as you know, became very obvious recently with the sale of Bayraktar drones, right, to Ukraine. So these all show that Turkey wants to balance Russian power, right, both in the Black Sea and also in the Middle East. Why did I say Middle East? Because as you know, in this situation of international relations today, the regions are connected. So Black Sea region and Middle East are not isolated. As you remember, just after occupation and annexation of Crimea, Russia also occupied Syria, right? And today, I will be honest, Crimea has become a ship, an unsinking ship that carries aeroplanes, right? War aeroplanes. Basically, it is what it is. It is so heavily militarized, right? So that maybe it has more weapons per person than any place in the world. It is a whole peninsula, the beautiful green island, has turned into a complete military base. And from there on, Russia gained a lot of capability to, attack Syria or, to forward its own Syrian policy. So this brings me to Russia, why Crimea is important for Russia. as you know, Crimea is not adjacent to Russia, so it had to build a bridge from Kaman to Kerch Peninsula, right? And also big big facilities such as electricity production places, because Crimea gets its electricity from Ukraine, gets its water from Ukraine, and once it is separated from Ukraine, Russia had to heavily subsidize Crimea. Crimea, I think, costs millions of dollars for Russia each year, right? So why did Russia get into such an economic trouble, right? As we know, Russia is economically dependent on oil. It doesn't have a huge industry. Even its military industry is still very backwards. The reason is Crimea is on the way of energy routes, right? And Russia wants to secure its energy routes to Europe, of course. It doesn't want to be blackmailed by Ukraine. And it is also, as I said, strategically very important because after annexing Crimea, the Azov Sea, for example, is completely closed, a Russian lake now. And even Black Sea, right? The half of maritime waters of Black Sea now belongs to Russia, as well as all the facilities for searching for oil and natural gas, and even shale gas, they say can be found under Black Sea. So Russia doesn't need it right now, but Black Sea has a lot of untapped potential. So for energy resources, right, for strategic and for military purposes, Russia, in order to become a Black Sea power, in order to become a Middle Eastern power, a regional power, and even a great power again, right? In order to reclaim its lost prestige, Crimea was annexed to Russia. And a benefit also became Putin's rising popularity in the country, right? Because economy was not going so well. So Putin used this threat from Ukraine, right? These were all actually big media propagandas in order to increase its role in the region. So its popularity among the population.
Tutku, thank you for outlining how important it is for Turkey, and then how strategically it's important for Russia. But somehow this issue, the positions are very hard in many ways. Maybe that's why they feel like they shouldn't tackle it head on and compartmentalize, treat this issue perhaps separately. Talip hocam, Küçükcan, Professor Küçükcan, what is your impressions from that meeting today, when, like Professor Aydın mentioned, it's very, very important for Turkey. It's not a simple matter. Turkey actually even supports Ukraine through military sales, which obviously irritates Russia greatly. And Russia even refuses to talk about Crimea with Turkey. But at the same time, right, there is Libya, Syria, Karabakh, Afghanistan, trade relations. It's a very complex issue. How do you feel President Erdoğan and President Putin are able to or unable to manage it? How do you see it?
Well, Kadir, thank you very much. I also would like to congratulate Tutku on her new book. That's a welcome, I think, addition to the literature on Russian issues and Crimea. Let me first talk a little bit on the Crimean issue and how it is perceived in the US and also by the European Union, how they tackle. Because sometimes that is, Turkey is criticized, Turkey's position, but also we need to look at what the European Union has done and the US has done in the face of occupation and then annexation. What we see that, both powers, I would say, they also turn a blind eye to what happened in Crimea, in a sense. They talk about, human rights issues, etc. But when you look at the Russian policy of, expanding its sphere of influence, I think EU and the US terribly failed in terms of countering Russian expansionism in the region. They just condemned what happened, but they did not do anything else. What we see, as Tutku has already said, I think Turkey follows a persistent and consistent policy of bringing this issue on the international fora. Of course, maybe it was not one of the major topics of today's discussion, simply because Turkish-Russian relations are multidimensional and multi-layered. As Kadir has already said, there are some areas of convergence of interests and divergence of interests. And I think Crimea is one of the areas where the interests of both countries diverge. Therefore, they try to, I think, focus on areas that both countries can work together, despite the fact that the NATO, European Union, and the US criticize Turkey because it is, becoming more friendly with Russia. Today, for example, what we have seen by the statements of two leaders is that the economic relations are critical for both countries. Russia is spending more and more in terms of investing in Turkey, almost $6.5 billion now, the investment. And Turkey is also investing in Russia. And also what we see, that we talked about energy today, Tutku has raised that question. And there's a lot of exchange between Turkey and Russia in terms of energy. And also we know that the Russian gas goes through Turkey to Europe as well. So we also need to look at that aspect of the relationship, which is quite strong, which is quite maybe positive for both sides. This is one dimension that we need to look at. And also Turkey's tourism industry very much depends on Russian tourists. Today, in the first 9 months, we know that 2.5 million Russians came to Turkey. That is I think, some sort of injection into the Turkish economy. In 2019, that number before the COVID-19, it was about 6.5 million on an annual basis. Russians used to come to Turkey. Therefore, I think we should keep this in mind when we are talking about Turkish-Russian relations, avoiding some areas of divergence, Kadir. And maybe also you can talk about how Turkish-Russian, let's say, rapprochement or relationship is perceived in the US today, because we know that when Turkish president made a statement on a US television that Turkey could buy the second batch of S-14, I think that was some sort of, there was a criticism by the US side.
Well, you're referring to President Erdoğan's interview with CBS, where he actually, for me, I took it as a reassertion of Turkish sovereignty and decisions that, can be made on national defense and foreign policy. President Erdoğan said, that's our decision. Nobody can impose decisions on us. And then when the interviewer asked, does that mean, yes, you might buy more? And he's like, of course. But I don't see it as an immediate, perhaps, consideration. But the perspective in the US, like you mentioned, is often negative and associated with, Russian leader Putin and Turkey's, turning its back on the West, on NATO, etc. But the problem, of course, which actually I wanted to ask this to Professor Aydın, Professor Küçükcan mentioned the fact that, Turkey is not being well understood in the West, and it's being criticized in its relationship with Russia often. And then you also mentioned geopolitically, Turkey is actually trying to balance Russia. Through its relationship with Ukraine, Poland recently, right? these are countries that are nervous about Russian power, Russian influence being increasing in the region. How do you see that? Do you feel like the EU and US somehow misunderstand this, or doesn't appreciate Turkey's sort of efforts to balance or counterbalance Russia geostrategically? How do you see it, Professor Aydın?
I would completely agree with you. I think if you are suggesting that, I think they don't appreciate it at all. U.S. foreign policy, as you know, is not the biggest success in the world historically as well. So U.S. foreign policy also fails in this respect, thinking that U.S. is not interested anymore in the Middle East. Thereby, after the Cold War, Turkey's importance has diminished for U.S. I think these are all wrong analysis of the situation. And same we can say for the European Union as well. They are also they don't, in a way, like they don't want to be very much interested in that region, right? I mean, they are not all that interested. They want to get the energy, and that's all, right? But the security of the region at the end of the day and the economic issues that could arise will affect both Europe and the US, right? For these reasons, I think they have to support Turkey in order to balance Russia, and they have to find ways of cooperating with Turkey. I mean, when I think about it, I don't really understand why are they pushing Turkey away from themselves, while at the same time pushing Russia away too. Right? I mean, what are they trying to achieve? It is a mystery to me, but maybe you have some idea.
Perhaps there is too much mistrust and because of other issues, but we are seeing in many ways Europeans are starting to have to think more strategically when the US is pulling away and is not providing the leadership that it used to. So the Europeans are only starting now to ask these strategic questions, but like the Turkish, ties to Russia on energy, we are seeing European powers, Germany and others, not completely, but they are dependent on Russian energy sources, and that is kind of something that prevents them from confronting Russia, except for rhetorically, perhaps. They are talking about confronting Russia, but when it comes down to it, trade relations, energy relations, etc., they end up trying to work with Russia. So one country that is actually, selling defense products, conducts arms sales to Ukraine and Poland is actually Turkey. So it's a like you said, it's a bit of a mystery, it's a bit of a contradiction, of course, but we are not short of contradictions in the world of international relations. What I wanted to ask you is the status quo that is currently in place in Crimea. Do you see that changing anytime soon? Is there any power that can change that, or is it going to be yet another frozen conflict for a long time? If you can briefly think about that, I want to turn to Professor Küçükcan after that.
Well, it depends on, again, U.S. and European Union's reaction and initiative on the issue, right? After all, Ukraine has said it does not want to fight for Crimea, right? Because it doesn't have the resources and capabilities to do that. And also it doesn't believe that's the solution, right? Because it's already fighting with Russian-supported separatists in Donbass, so it doesn't have the power. So the only other way of ending Crimean occupation is then diplomacy.
Professor Küçükcan, as you heard, Professor Aydın talked about how EU failed to appreciate Turkey's importance in counterbalancing Russia. But you also mentioned, EU and US kind of failing strategically to kind of work with Turkey, right? Collaborate with Turkey on Russia. But at the same time, we also talked about the, common interests between Turkey and Russia, and they don't obviously want to damage their relationship, overall relationship. And when you looked at the readouts and the news coming out of Sochi today, especially on Syria, we didn't get to talk about Syria a lot today. How do you see the dynamics in Syria? There's, Turkish military on the ground, there's Russian military on the ground, there's a stalemate in many ways. How do you see that playing out in the weeks and months ahead?
I think that is one of the critical issues between Turkey and Russia, because both countries are somehow interested in the affairs of Syria. Turkey is very much interested because Turkey has a long border and already almost 4 million Syrians living in Turkey. And also there is a very high risk in Idlib, especially. If the Sochi agreement fails, then we might see a new wave of migration to Turkey. That's why Turkey would like to see some sort of stability, some sort of, peace in at least in Idlib. Therefore, Turkey and Russia will, I think, in the long run and in the medium term, they will talk about what they can do together in Syria. Here, I also would like to point out that sometimes Europeans and Americans get angry with Turkey because Turkey is talking to Russia, but there isn't anyone else in Syria that Turkey can talk to because Russia has the leverage. Americans have left, and as you know, Europeans are not very much interested in the affairs of Syria. Therefore, the Syria is one of the issues that Turkey and Russia needs to talk.
Thank you, Professor Küçükcan. Today we addressed the issue of Russia, Turkey. Last week we talked about US, Turkey a lot. We appreciate Professor Aydın's participation today. Thank you so much. And we are gonna end our talk today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.